there. Welcome to Boldest, your go-to place for all things women in business, career development, as well as consulting. If you don't already know me, my name is Tamara, and I've been working in consulting just shy of a year now after graduating in marketing and digital innovation from McGill in 2019. So today I want to address something that's pretty common in professional social media, and that's building your personal brand. More specifically, in today's video, I want to discuss what is personal branding and why it's important, how you can build your own personal brand, how you can build a compelling narrative in order to sell it, and then finally, I want to discuss my own brand and how I've been building it over the course of the years and how I'm still doing that today. So first of all, what is self-branding all about? I can literally imagine my dad rolling his eyes as he listens to this because I know he's probably one of the most anti-consumerism people that I know. However, unlike the most iconic brands you know, such as Microsoft, Apple, or McDonald's, self-branding is different in that it involves understanding oneself in order to consistently grasp opportunities that are in the realm of what we love to do. Unfortunately, when I look online, the only material about self-branding is really in the areas of starting a business or growing a social media audience. I urge you to move away from this misconception that building a self-brand can only be with starting a business, and instead urge you to think of it as something that all professionals, no matter their experience, should aim to have. Especially when it comes to being a student, when you're often in a hiring cycle, or as a consultant, where you're always trying to network in order to get staffed on a project, self-branding is important for 3 reasons. First of all, you want people to think of you as passionate about something or really good at something when staffing an opportunity so that they think of you. Second of all, you can use your self-brand to build a reputation with your network in order to identify some exit or future opportunities for yourself. And finally, self-branding is a great way to be remembered in the context of networking. You don't need to be a wannabe influencer in order to have a professional brand. I like to think of a professional brand as simply a common thread that is consistent throughout all of your professional experiences. You need to figure out what you love to do, not what you think you should be doing, in order to grasp opportunities to consistently push this forward. So in order to help you figure out your own self-brand, I've broken this down into 3 sections. So part 1 is introspection, part 2 is gathering the experiences to build your brand narrative, and step 3 is telling your brand narrative in a very compelling way. Part 1 is introspection, and the first subsection of that is finding your strengths. Finding and knowing your strengths is so incredibly important because it allows you to put yourself in situations where you can really thrive. Additionally, knowing your strengths makes it much easier to sell yourself to potential hires as they know what they're signing up for when they work with you. I want to note something here that a strength isn't necessarily something that you're just good at. Rather, it's at the intersection of what you love to do and what you're really good at. Frankly, once you figure out something that you love, it'll be much easier to upskill this as you won't mind spending the 10,000 hours required to perfect it. My take is that a strength is something that you can't get enough of, you don't mind doing until 3 a.m., and that ultimately really fuels you. So how do you figure out what your strengths are? So I was recently listening to Sarah Blakely's masterclass, and she's objectively one of the most successful entrepreneurs of our generation. And her tip in finding all the ideas for the great products that she's invented was keeping a notepad in her car and near her bedstand in order to jot down any ideas that she had. And after listening to that, I've actually started to do the same thing, but with my strengths. So anytime that I find myself doing something that I really love or can't get enough of, I note it down so that I can always have that ongoing list in my back pocket. I know what it's like to be in an interview and you get asked what are your top strengths, and it's really hard in the moment to think of all the things that you're good at or that you love to do. However, if you have this, then it will make that process much easier. Another option to figure out your strengths are leveraging some assessments to figure out where you really thrive. So there are a bunch of personality tests, strength finder quizzes, and even EQ tests that will help you figure these out. Although I urge you to not consider these as the end-all be-all, but rather as a first step to start the conversation or your thought process around what you're really good at. In order to help you in this process, I've linked in articles by Forbes down below that has a bunch of assessments that you could potentially take. Let me know if you try any and how you find them. So the second subsection in the introspection process is figuring out your interests or passions. So this actually came to me because I was having a conversation with friends over the course of the past week. The conversation ended up centering around the fact that some people don't have some key passions, but instead mildly like a bunch of different things. And although I do agree with this, there's a misconception within hustle culture that your calling or your one true passion will just fall out of the sky one day. I think like anything in life, there's a way to be strategic in determining your interests and where you want to work in. Thus, I urge you to start by making a list of all the different functions that you could occupy within an organization. This can be everything from finance and accounting, creative services, law, IT, education, the list goes on. And then I also urge you to make a list of all of the different industries that you could work in. This can be everything from arts and music, food and bev, fashion and beauty, real estate, military, pharma, the list goes on. And then what you can do is go ahead and cross-reference these in order to determine some key industries and functions that really appeal to you. And obviously this isn't set in stone. This simply allows you to identify certain scenarios that you could see yourself thriving in. So now that you've figured out your strengths, your interests, and the areas that you could potentially thrive in, the next step is goal setting. I want to preface this by the fact that these goals that you set don't necessarily need to be set in stone and don't need to be the end-all be-all of everything. However, I do recommend goal setting for two main reasons. First of all, it'll enable you to work towards a specific direction, and second of all, it'll enable you to do something called backcasting, which is where you set an end goal and then you determine all of the steps necessary in the process to get to that goal. As a very goal-oriented person, I have found this extremely helpful in staying motivated. You can also set some short, medium, and long-term goals in order to keep you going in this common thread. For example, your short-term goal might be to work in investment banking, followed by a VP position at a large company. And finally, your end goal, so almost near retirement age, might be to go back, do your PhD, and then teach finance at your alma mater. As you can see, all of these objectives have a common thread, but are keeping you working towards a singular goal. So just as a caveat here, I want to mention that there are obviously a lot of different ways that you can reach a goal. Some people will span tons of functions and industries in order to get to a specific area that they feel that they really thrive in. However, I feel like it's just easier to set a goal and then find a direction for yourself to work towards. And obviously being super flexible if this changes through time. And then once you've set these goals, I recommend my favorite Sunday afternoon activity, some light LinkedIn stalking. And although I'm kind of kidding here, I think there's something to be said about looking up the types of people who are currently filling roles that you would love to see yourself in, and then look at what their backgrounds, interests, and prior experiences are. And this can help validate the work that you're currently doing or help you slightly pivot directions so that you know that you're working towards this very singular goal. So once again, I think there's something to be said about strategic goal setting and determining how you're going to meet your desired achievements. So now that you've done all of your introspection, the next step in this process is identifying types of experiences and opportunities that help support your narrative. And the first thing I want to urge you to do is start early. So although it's never too late to start building a brand in a specific direction, I really think that university is a great time to do this. When you get into university, there's so many clubs and conferences and just ways to get involved that you can really use to build your brand from the start. So what I want to mention here is that I think there's a way to pick and choose the activities that you get involved in a strategic way. There's simply not enough hours in a day to do everything that you want to do. So the way that I like to structure my extracurricular involvement when I was at school was by having one major commitment. So I was the executive director of a conference that I worked on for a full year. Next, I had some short bursts of high intensity involvement through case competitions that I was really fond of. And finally, I had some lower level commitments that were mostly social. So I was in a sorority and I got involved in various mentoring programs. And that was sort of the main activities that I did while I was at school. So you need to honor the fact that you might have very diverse interests, but just try to see if you can build a common narrative with all of these interests that you do. So for example, you might be a finance major who loves to be on the investment committee, but you also play varsity soccer. And the way that you can sell your narrative to a hiring manager is essentially by saying that you're a very active person, you're proactive, and you love to get stuff done, you're very well-rounded, and you love to have different activities going on in your life. And then finally, you're a team player, as you've demonstrated through being part of a varsity team. So the second step in this process is finding a job that supports your purpose. I can't stress enough how important it is to keep the ball rolling once you've actually started working full-time. So going back to hustle culture, this whole expectation that you'll only be doing work that is absolutely mindless and that doesn't really support your larger vision. And this could be a reality, to be honest, especially in consulting when you're doing various projects of varying lengths and subjects. Not everything you do is going to be right up your alley. Even if it's not exactly what you think you want to do, I do encourage you to take on the role and do it for long enough that you actually know the ramifications of it. Then you want to take a step back and ensure that the work that you're doing on a daily basis is driving towards a larger vision. Don't just work 14-hour days for the sake of working 14-hour days. Make sure that you're building transferable skills, a network that you can lean on, and that ultimately you're growing in the direction that you're keen to grow in. Work hard and grind, but ultimately do it with a purpose. So if you're kind of stuck in a role like this, here's my advice. Speak to your manager in setting roles and responsibilities that are in line with what you want to do. Next, get involved in activities that go above and beyond the 40+ hours a week that you do so that you can keep working on those skills. And then finally, be super strict with yourself in setting where you want to be in 3, 6, and 12 months so that if you want to know that you want to work in a different type of project or a different type of role, you are able to reach that. Finally, don't stop there. I know exactly what it's like to start working and to fall in a routine. You have a salary and you might even have been working for months or years towards a very specific goal. In my case, that was getting to work in consulting. And absolutely, you need to take this time to celebrate, you need to adjust to this new lifestyle that you're living, and you also need to take a step back and look at your goals for the next stage in your career. However, before you take your foot off the gas completely, I encourage you to look beyond the work that you're doing on a daily basis to find other opportunities that could help you grow. This could be anything from taking up vlogging, working for an NGO, helping planning some social or community events, curating content on social media, getting involved with alumni associations, or getting certified in specific areas that you want to work towards. So the final step in building your personal brand is to tell a compelling narrative. In other words, sell it. You've probably heard about the mythical elevator pitch, a situation in which you walk into an elevator with an executive of your dream company and you have less than 20 seconds to introduce yourself and tell them why you would be great to work for their company. And if you haven't, you've definitely received the "tell me a little bit about yourself" question in the context of an interview. And the underlying idea here is that you need to be able to tell your story in a succinct and a compelling way, telling people who you are, where you are, and where you're going. So how do you do this? Well, first you want to figure the common denominator between all of your professional experiences, aka your professional brand. Maybe your common denominator is a lot of travel or teamwork or wanting to work in a specific industry. Figure it out and use it. Next, figure out your one-liner. You need to determine what you care about and succinctly summarize it in one sentence. For example, my one-liner is that I'm passionate about elevating the customer experience through data and technology. As you can see, it's pretty simple and straightforward. Next, you want to establish your background and share some accomplishments. For example, I'm a recent graduate from McGill in marketing and digital innovation, and I've decided to pursue a career in marketing technology and digital transformation consulting, specifically in the industries of retail, financial services, as well as consumer goods. If you have the time, I encourage you to buff it up with some interests that go above and beyond this. I'm also extremely excited about the fashion industry as well as women in business, and I hope to work at the intersection of these areas in the future of my career. As you can see, I give a little bit more insight into what I care about in order to really bring this home. If you'd like some help to craft it or review it, please reach out to me on Instagram or LinkedIn, and I'd be really happy to do so. So the last thing I want to note here is the fact that your brand also includes a visual component. And no, you're not necessarily building a company, so you won't have a logo for your name. However, there are some visual components that you can keep in mind. For example, the tone of your voice when speaking on social media, or the type of graphics and colors that you use either in building out your CV and cover letter, on your application, or simply the way that you dress and present yourself. In general, I like to keep things really fresh, bubbly, colorful, and a little bit girly, and that's just a brand that I've wanted to curate on social media, through my YouTube videos, and even at work with my peers. So the last point I want to bring up here is my own experience building my brand. And I want to caveat this by saying that I haven't always known what my personal brand is. However, it was about during my first year at university that I started identifying some areas that I was really keen on that I wanted to pursue, more specifically the fashion, beauty, self-care industry, second, marketing and marketing technology, and then finally, women in business and career development. And there's a couple of things over the past 3 to 4 years that I've done in order to really bring these points home about myself. First of all, in the context of work, I've taken my passion for digital transformation and marketing technology, and I now work for a consulting firm specializing in these specific areas. At school, I also got involved in a ton of quiz competitions once I knew I wanted to go into consulting, as these gave me a ton of transferable skills in the areas of financial modeling, PowerPoints, public speaking, and just general structuring. I was also a mentee and a mentor in various mentoring programs at McGill, which were super exciting to me and I really was passionate about. And through my work now, I'm able to get involved in various opportunities for helping support female empowerment. So essentially, I'm not trying to blow up my achievements here. That's not at all the point. I'm trying to show that because I set my objectives and I was able to determine my interests early on, although they weren't set in stone, I've consistently worked towards areas that help create a brand narrative for myself that now makes sense. Of course, looking back, I think it's definitely so easy to just be able to take all of your experiences and just string together a compelling story. However, I think it's a little bit of both. I think as you're going through it, you have to be mindful about the actions that you take and where you spend your time. But then at the end of the day, you also have to be a really good storyteller and be able to show that there's a common denominator between all of your experiences, no matter what that is. So with these two components together, you'll really be able to craft an exceptional personal brand. So that's it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I felt like it was a really important precursor to the next phase in the consulting recruitment process, and that's behavioral interviews. I found that having a personal brand really helped me in preparing for those in the first place. So once again, if you'd like some help building out your elevator pitch or your tell me about yourself question, reach out to me on Instagram or LinkedIn. My Instagram handle is Tamara_Belair, and I really hope to hear from you. Also, please let me know if there are other topics that you'd like me to cover in the future. Cheers! Thanks.